July 20th, 1969. It was a Sunday evening that would forever change humanity's relationship with the cosmos. Around the world, nearly 650 million people gathered around television sets, radios, and any device that could bring them closer to witnessing the impossible. In living rooms in Tokyo, cafes in Paris, town squares in Rio de Janeiro, and villages across Africa, the entire planet held its collective breath as 3 American astronauts hurtled through space toward a destination that had captivated human imagination for millennia, the moon.
For centuries, poets had written about it, lovers had gazed at it, and dreamers had wondered what it would be like to touch its surface. Now, for the first time in human history, that dream was about to become reality. But this wasn't just an American achievement. This was humanity's giant leap forward, and the whole world was watching. The journey had begun 8 years earlier, when President John F. Kennedy stood before Congress and made one of the boldest declarations in human history. He promised that America would land a man on the moon and return him safely to Earth before the decade was out. It seemed impossible. At the time, the Soviet Union was winning the space race. They had put the first satellite into orbit, the first man in space, the first woman in space. America was playing catch-up in a game where second place felt like failure. But Kennedy's challenge ignited something extraordinary in the American spirit. NASA became the focus of the nation's technological might. Engineers worked 18-hour days, scientists pushed the boundaries of what was possible, mathematicians calculated trajectories that had never been attempted, seamstresses hand-stitched spacesuits that would protect human life in the vacuum of space. It wasn't just the work of 3 astronauts, it was the work of over 400,000 people who contributed to making the impossible possible. On July 16, 1969, Apollo 11 lifted off from Kennedy Space Center in Florida. Neil Armstrong, the calm commander who had flown 78 combat missions in Korea. Buzz Aldrin, the methodical engineer who had earned a doctorate from MIT. Michael Collins, the pilot who would orbit the moon alone while his crewmates made history on its surface. As the massive Saturn V rocket thundered into the sky, generating more power than a small city, millions of Americans lined the beaches and highways of Florida, watching their hopes and dreams disappear into the blue. The 3-day journey to the moon was followed minute by minute around the world. Newspapers printed special editions tracking their progress. Television programming was interrupted with updates. Children stayed up past their bedtimes, begging their parents to let them witness history. In communist countries where American achievements were usually downplayed, even the state-controlled media couldn't ignore the magnitude of what was happening.
In Moscow, despite the Cold War tensions,
Soviet citizens quietly gathered around any available television or radio to follow the mission. The same people who had been told that capitalism was evil found themselves rooting for 3 American heroes who represented the best of human courage and determination. Politics seemed suddenly small when measured against the vastness of space and the audacity of the human spirit. On the morning of July 20th, the lunar module Eagle separated from the command module Columbia. Michael Collins would continue orbiting the moon, earning him the lonely distinction of being the most isolated human being in history as he passed behind the moon and lost radio contact with both Earth and his crewmates. Meanwhile, Armstrong and Aldrin began their descent to the lunar surface in a spacecraft that had less computing power than a modern calculator. The descent was fraught with danger. Computer alarms blared in the cramped cabin. They were running low on fuel. The designated landing site was littered with boulders that could destroy their fragile craft. Armstrong took manual control and flew the Eagle like a helicopter, searching for a safe place to land while fuel gauges ticked toward empty. With less than 30 seconds of fuel remaining, they touched down in the Sea of Tranquility. "The Eagle has landed," Armstrong radioed to Earth, his voice calm despite the enormous pressure he had just endured. Those 4 simple words traveled 240,000 miles through space and into the homes of people around the world. In Mission Control in Houston, grown men wept with relief and joy. In homes across America, families cheered and hugged each other. In countries around the globe, people who had never met an American found themselves celebrating this triumph of human achievement. But the most breathtaking moment was still to come. 6.5 hours later, Neil Armstrong opened the hatch of the lunar module and began to climb down a simple aluminum ladder. Each step was broadcast live to Earth, the grainy black and white images becoming some of the most watched footage in television history. As his boot touched the lunar surface, Armstrong spoke the words that would echo through eternity. "That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind." In that moment, something profound happened to human consciousness. For the first time, our species had touched another world. A farm boy from Ohio was walking on the moon, representing not just America, but all of humanity. The footage was simultaneously alien and familiar. There was Armstrong, bouncing in the low gravity, planting an American flag that would never wave because there's no wind on the moon, collecting rocks that were older than any living thing on Earth. Around the world, the reaction was electric. In Times Square, thousands of people gathered to watch the landing on giant television screens, cheering and crying at the same time. In London, pubs stayed open past closing time.
Patrons could witness history. In Australia, where it was Monday afternoon, workers abandoned their jobs to crowd around any available television. In India, families who had never owned a television found ways to watch or listen. This was bigger than nationalism. This was about human possibility.
Buzz Aldrin joined Armstrong on the surface, and together they conducted experiments, collected samples, and took photographs that would inspire generations. Aldrin described the lunar landscape as magnificent desolation, a phrase that perfectly captured the stark beauty and profound loneliness of standing on another world. They were 240,000 miles from home, farther from safety than any humans had ever been, yet their calm professionalism made it look almost routine. Meanwhile, Michael Collins orbited overhead, completing one of the most crucial yet underappreciated roles in the mission. Every time he passed behind the moon and lost radio contact with Earth, he was utterly alone, in a way that no human had ever been alone. If something went wrong with the Eagle, if Armstrong and Aldrin couldn't rejoin him, he would have to return to Earth by himself, carrying the unbearable weight of leaving his crewmates behind. The pressure on Collins was immense, yet he executed his duties with the same calm professionalism that characterized the entire crew. After 21 hours on the lunar surface, it was time to leave. The ascent from the moon was perhaps the most dangerous part of the entire mission. If the ascent engine failed, Armstrong and Aldrin would be stranded forever on the lunar surface, with no possibility of rescue. The entire world held its breath as the upper stage of the lunar module fired its engine and lifted off from the moon. The grainy footage showed the American flag being blown over by the rocket exhaust, a small detail that somehow made the whole incredible achievement feel more human and real. The successful rendezvous with Collins in lunar orbit was followed by the 3-day journey home. But the mission wasn't over until they were safely back on Earth. Re-entering Earth's atmosphere at 25,000 miles per hour was like threading a needle while riding a rocket. Too steep and they would burn up. Too shallow and they would skip off the atmosphere and be lost in space forever. But on July 24th, the Apollo 11 command module splashed down safely in the Pacific Ocean, and 3 American heroes were home. The impact of the moon landing extended far beyond that July evening. It proved that humans could work together to achieve the impossible. It showed that science and engineering could overcome any obstacle. It demonstrated that dreams, no matter how audacious, could become reality with enough determination and hard work. Most importantly, it gave the entire world a shared moment of pride in human achievement. The photographs taken during the mission, particularly the famous Earthrise, words could broaden.
Image showing our blue planet rising over the lunar horizon fundamentally changed how humans viewed their place in the universe. For the first time, we could see Earth as it really was. A small, fragile oasis in the vast darkness of space. Environmental movements were inspired by these images. The idea that we're all passengers on Spaceship Earth became a rallying cry for unity and environmental protection. The moon landing also marked America's finest hour in the space race, but it did something more important than just beating the Soviet Union. It showed the world what America could be at its best. Innovative, determined, generous in spirit, and capable of inspiring the entire human race. The astronauts were American, but they carried the hopes and dreams of all humanity. Today, more than 50 years later, we're still living in the world that Apollo 11 created. The technologies developed for the moon landing gave us everything from computer chips to cordless tools to water purification systems. More importantly, it gave us the knowledge that there are no limits to what humans can achieve when we work together toward a common goal. As we stand on the threshold of returning to the moon and perhaps traveling to Mars, we remember that summer evening in 1969 when the impossible became possible. We remember Neil Armstrong's calm courage, Buzz Aldrin's methodical precision, and Michael Collins' lonely vigil in lunar orbit. We remember the 400,000 people who made their journey possible. Most of all, we remember that on July 20th, 1969, the entire world watched America step forward. And in doing so, all of humanity took a giant leap into the future.